introduce green supply chain management. Okay, speaking of supply chain management, as we know, logistics procurement has become strategy. Okay, and after COVID-19, we find out strategy management plays an important role for countries and enterprises. If we would like to build up long-term competitive advantage, you have to build up resilient strategic supply chain for your countries and your enterprises. Okay, and organizations also forming partnership and build up strategic alliances are quite important if you would like to build up resilient supply chain management. And product environment becomes more complex. Okay, and right now, multinational companies they suffer from a lot of operation problems. Okay, for example, right now we have tariff problems. From President Trump, okay, and as we know, there is a conflict between mainland China and the United States. Okay, so for multinational companies, they have to deal with this kind of international conflict. Okay, and this kind of international conflict will cause a lot of problems of the supply chain. Okay, time-based competition requires time compression. Okay, and, sometimes we have to deliver our products or services to our target customer as soon as possible. Okay, so that's why time-based competition can determine your company's competitive advantage. The managed suppliers and customer relationship are necessary. Okay, the competition shifting from company versus company to supply chain versus supply chain. And this is traditional supply chain. Okay, in the beginning, we import raw materials. Okay. And sometimes raw materials can determine raw materials. If we have to ensure the supply of key raw materials. Okay, and the next is suppliers. Okay, especially component parts. Component parts are so important for some industry. If you have electricity vehicles industry as example, okay, it's battery. Batteries are key component parts of electricity vehicles. Okay, so for suppliers, they can supply key batteries for electricity vehicles. Okay, and we can argue this kind of supplier are so important for electricity vehicles manufacturers. Okay, and if you have some chip manufacturer, if you have TSMC as example, why is TSMC so important in the world? It's because TSMC dominates advanced foundry manufacturing in the world. Okay, so that's why TSMC is a key supplier in the semiconductor industry in the world. Okay, the next step is manufacturing. Okay, assembling manufacturing companies. Okay, so if you take Fastcom as an example, Fastcom is an important ICT assembly manufacturing company in the world. Okay, and Apple outsources their iPhone manufacturer to Fastcom. So the next is distribution. Okay, after assembly manufacturing, we need to distribute our products to our target market. Okay, so next is end user. We distribute our products to our end users. Okay, and after we deliver our end products to our target customer, we have to provide post-purchase services to our end users. Okay, so this is traditional supply chain. Okay, and a supply chain is the network of all the activity involving delivering finished products or services to the customer. Okay, and the sourcing of a supply chain includes raw material, assembly, warehousing, order entry, distribution, and delivery. Okay, and the supply chain management is a vital business function that coordinates all of the network links. Okay, so that's why supply chain management is quite important right now. We need to coordinate movement of goods through supply chains from suppliers to manufacturers to distributors. Okay, and we need to promote information sharing along chain like forecast, okay, sales data, and promotions. Speaking of components of a supply chain for manufacturer, there are several components of a supply chain. Okay, firstly is external supplier, okay, source of raw materials. Okay, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Okay, the next component of a supply chain is internal function. Okay, internal functions include processing functions, processing, purchasing, planning, quality, shipping, and so on. The next component is external distributors. Okay. It means we transport finished products to appropriate locations, and logistic managers are responsible for managing the movement of products between locations. Okay, and it includes traffic management, okay, arranging the method of shipment for both incoming and outgoing products or materials. Okay, the next part of external distribution is distribution management. Okay, it means movement of material from manufacturers to the customer. Okay, so if you look at supply chain management, information flow is quite important. Okay, we need to collect information, okay, for the entire supply chain. Okay, for example, how to collect the information for the entire supply chain. Firstly, for retailer collect information from end users. Okay, and the local distributors, they collect information from retailers. Okay, and the regional regional distributors, they collect information from local distributors across the world. Okay, finally, for manufacturers, okay, they need to collect information from regional distributors across the world. Okay, besides information flows, okay, we also need to collect cash flow, the information with respect to cash flow. Okay, so information flow, okay, cash flow, and the product flow. Okay, so for supply chain management, there are three kinds of flows are so important. Okay, the first flow is information flow. Second flow is cash flow. Okay, the third kind of flow is product or service flow. Okay, so that's why we need to undertake data analysis, big data analysis. And, besides big data analysis, sometimes we need to implement AI technologies, okay, to forecast the needs for our end users. Okay, let's refer to this video on YouTube, creating a more sustainable and green supply chain.
Potential options, but will result in a much supply chain. Sustainability is becoming a major focus for supply chains around the world, with firms such as Nike, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon taking a look at how sustainable and green their supply chains are. With more pressure than ever on creating green and more environmentally friendly supply chains, while at the same time reducing costs on supply chain managers are increasingly looking at new ways to improve their sustainability and cost-efficient options. Here are some of the top steps to creating a greener supply chain. 1. Packaging is key. Think of how your products are packaged. This is one of the first areas of focus for firms that are seeking to reduce not only supply chain carbon emissions, but also freight costs. Consider using paper products and cardboard instead of plastics, and when you need to use plastics, use recycled materials. This will require talking with your packaging providers about potential options, but will result in a much more environmentally friendly supply chain. For shippers that are holding inventory in third-party fulfillment centers, such as Amazon FBA, reducing packaging volume is a great way to also reduce inventory holding costs. 2. Mode selection and transit time. This is one of the easiest and highest ROI areas for any individual activity within your supply chain to reduce costs and carbon emissions. Proper inventory level and demand planning give your company the ability to reduce its use of expedited shipping, air freight, and put more long-haul freight on intermodal trains. This not only will reduce supply chain costs by 15 to 25%, it will also reduce supply chain emissions substantially, as intermodal freight is around 75% more energy efficient than over-the-road trucking, and is highly competitive on routes longer than 500 miles. Particularly for cross-country freight, intermodal represents an important source of capacity. Intermodal is also used for a huge amount of cross-border freight from Canada to the United States, and also from Mexico to the United States. Cargo is also more secure with trains than the trucks, with a lesser amount of cargo theft experienced by intermodal shippers. Zero can work with you to explore which lanes are best as conversion fluids and build mode optimization across your network to maximize savings as well as sustainability. Contact us today for an intermodal rate quote. Physical assets and energy usage. This is another area of potentially high ROI. Incorporating more efficient HVAC systems, solar panels, more efficient heating, cooling, lighting, and insulation can drastically reduce utility costs as well as the carbon footprint of a particular building. Over time, these improvements will start to make a noticeable impact on your company's expenses. Many new warehousing and factory facilities that are built consider from the beginning the methods that will be used to reduce energy costs and work with engineers to reduce energy usage. Working with suppliers. It's important to work with your suppliers to explain any sustainability efforts and goals. This can include, and very likely will include, working with them regarding packaging and how to increase increase the use of recycled materials and biodegradable materials into packaging design, as well as simply try to reduce the sheer amount of packaging used in the product. Proper measurement and goal setting. It's hard to make improvement without being able to clearly measure important metrics related to your supply chain sustainability goals. Depending on your company's footprint, keep track of mode usage, energy usage by company buildings, packaging size, and weight. Share topical sustainability numbers company-wide to build sustainability into the culture of your firm. 6. Emissions tracking. Over time, EPA requirements for motor vehicles will only become increasingly stringent from federal, state, and even city-specific regulations on trucks, trains, and other equipment like forklifts. While you don't always want to preemptively buy new equipment without the regulation,
Okay, you can go to the video by yourself.
Spending slightly more and replacing the equipment with equipment that is.
Okay, these tips are so important if we would like to undertake green supply chain management. Okay, and why supply chain is so important? Okay, speaking of profitability, okay, it has the potential to create value for profit for the business. Okay, so if we would like to reduce cost, it is not easy to undertake cost reduction. Okay, however, if we can cooperate with our supply chain members. Okay, and for example, we can build up ERP system, okay, advanced IT system. Okay, we can co-work together, okay, to redesign our process activities and so on. Okay, we can reduce the entire cost of our supply chain. Okay, and the next is criticality. Brands cannot be sustainable unless their supply chain becomes sustainable first. Okay, if we would like to undertake corporate sustainability, we need to cooperate with our supply chain partners. Okay, for example, we would like to reduce carbon emissions. As we know, there are 3 scopes of carbon emissions: Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Okay, Scope 1 is direct carbon emissions. Okay, Scope 2 is indirect carbon emissions from your electricity consumption, right? Okay, and the Scope 3 is indirect carbon emissions from your supply chain. Okay, and in my opinion, it is not easy to reduce carbon emissions from Scope 3. Okay, so the critical point is Scope 3 of carbon emissions. So that's why if we would like to achieve net zero before 2050, we have to cooperate with our supply chain members to undertake carbon reduction. Okay, and this is the network system of supply chain. Okay, if you look at the focal first is the manufacturers. Okay, there are this is the network system of the supply chain of the manufacturer. Okay. And we can separate into 2 parts: demand flow and the product flow. If we look at demand flow, okay, there are tier 1 supplier, tier 2 supplier. Okay, tier 3 supplier is a raw material vendor. Okay, so this is demand flow. Okay, the supply side. Okay, the other side is product flow. Okay. The first one is distribution centers. Okay, if you look at, there are 2 distribution centers for the manufacturer. Okay, this is the tier 1 distributor. Okay, speaking of tier 2 distributor is retailer. Okay, distribution centers, they deliver their products to local retailers. Okay, and the end user, they go to retailers to purchase their products. Okay, so this is the networking system of the supply chain for the manufacturers. Okay, and what is green supply chain management? Okay, it means management of raw materials and services from suppliers to manufacturers or service providers to customers, and backed with improvement of environmental impact implicitly considered. Okay. For example, if you look at this figure, okay, this is a traditional supply chain. Okay, from raw material vendors, okay, virgin material, okay, fabrication, assembly, okay, and the customer. Okay, every actor, they will produce waste. Okay, okay, and we follow 3R rules: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Okay. Besides 3R rules, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Okay, we need another R is remanufacture. Okay, firstly, we need to reduce our waste. Okay, speaking of green supply chain management. Okay, every partner within our supply chain, we ask them need to reduce their waste. Okay. Besides reduce waste reduction, okay, we reuse waste or byproducts of the activity of the supply chain, or remanufacture our waste or byproducts of every activity. Okay. Besides reduce, reuse, and remanufacture, okay, we can recycle our the waste or byproducts of every activities in our supply chain. Okay, finally, after reduce, reuse, remanufacture, and recycle, okay, we dispose our waste. Okay, we need to reduce negative environmental impact of our entire supply chain. Okay, this is green supply chain management. We combine supply chain management and green management. Okay, both of them. Okay, the first kind of management is supply chain management. The second management is green management. We combine both of them. Okay, we combine both of them becomes green supply chain management. Okay, speaking of green sourcing principles or values, best efforts to mitigate all kinds of pollution, air pollution, water, land, and the noise, and so on. In addition, we avoid creating waste whenever possible. Packaging, environmental friendly chemicals, and so on. Okay, next we reduce disposal cost. Okay, recycle waste, reuse packaging, and so on. Okay, next is lower operational cost. Okay, energy conservation, high density lighting, and so on. Speaking of corporate practice for green sourcing, make green parts of manufacturing process. Okay, for example, what percentage of their waste stream is recycled? what percentage of their raw materials are from recycling? Okay, and how much have they invested in green initiative? Okay, in addition, we need to encourage suppliers to undertake independent environmental certification. Okay. For example, ISO 14000. Okay, and furthermore, we need to build environmental criteria into supplier contract conditions. Sometimes we need to evaluate our supply chain partners every year. Okay, and how to determine the criteria. Okay, we would like to adopt to evaluate our supply chain members. Okay, in the past, most of the criteria are economic criteria. Okay. For example, how about the cost? Okay, how about the cost of the operation cost of our supply chain members? How about the price? Okay. How about price of the component parts and so on? So in the past, most of the criteria we adopt to determine our supply chain members are economic dimensions. Okay, besides economic dimensions, okay, right now we care about sustainability, right? Okay, so we add environmental criteria or social criteria. Okay, how about human rights? Okay, right now, supply chain members, they have to protect human rights of their employees. Okay, so this is the social dimensions criteria, and so on. Okay, and how about carbon emissions of your supply chain members, right? Okay, it is a critical criteria. Okay, we can adopt to determine our supply chain members' performance. Okay, and carbon emissions is a good example of environmental dimension criteria. Okay, and the next is conduct life cycle analysis in cooperation with supplier. Okay, and life cycle analysis is quite important. Okay, especially if you like to evaluate environmental dimension criteria. Okay, and for example, if you take electricity vehicle as an example. Okay, and as we know, batteries are not sustainable, right? If we would like to deal with the battery, in the end of their life cycle, the disposal cost of batteries are quite high, right? Okay, there is a pollution, environmental pollution. If we cannot properly deal with the battery, which are in the end of their life. Okay, so that's why we need to conduct life cycle analysis in cooperation with our suppliers. Okay, next is coordinate, minimization of environmental impact in the extended supply chain. Okay, and cooperate with supplier to deal with unoccupied environmental issues. Okay, for example, reduce packaging waste at the customer or supplier interface. Okay, reuse or recycle materials in cooperation with the supplier and so on. Okay, right now reverse logistics is more important right now. Okay, give supplier an incentive to reduce the customer's environmental load. Okay, and waste by byproducts reused by the raw material suppliers. Okay. And the material life cycle measurement is also important. Okay, so that's why right now we need to implement IT system to help companies to understand supply chain management. Okay, for example, ERP system. ERP system is quite popular right now. We can link the ERP system of the entire supply chain. Okay, if we can link the IT system of the entire supply chain, okay, we can coordinate effectively. And we can collect tiny data as soon as possible. If we can collect tiny data as soon as possible, okay, we can forecast the demand side or supply side information effectively. Okay, speaking of sustainability concern in green supply chain management. Okay, speaking of sustainability, okay, there are three triple bottom lines, right? There are three dimensions. If we would like to achieve sustainability: economic dimension, social dimensions, and environmental dimensions. Okay, if you look at the first dimension, economic dimension. Okay, economic goals in supply chains: cost, quality, speed of delivery, flexibility, resource utilization, visibility, and innovativeness. These are economic goals in supply chains. Okay, and how about social dimension? Speaking of social issues in supply chains, okay, for example, respect of human and workers' rights, okay, child labor, okay, bonded laborers' health and safety, working conditions, gender equalities, okay, poverty, alleviations, and so on. These are social issues in supply chain management. Okay, the third dimension is environmental dimensions. There are several environmental problems in our supply chain: pollution, climate change, a decline in ecosystem and biodiversity, and so on. Okay, we need to reduce these environmental problems. If we can achieve these three dimensions, okay, and it means you have outstanding sustainability in your supply chain. Okay, and the green supply chain management integrates environmental and supply chain management. Okay, so that's why we can argue green supply chain management, it combines supply chain management and the environmental management. It combines both of them. Okay, so green supply chain management recognizes this disproportionate environmental impact of supply chain processes in an organization. And the product life cycle is the basis of green supply chain management. Okay, and supply chain in the environmental life cycle, designing the supply chain currently with the products is the supply chain management best practice. Okay, and this is the typical supply chain scope. Okay. In addition, product design or product concept generation, both of them are so important. So that's why designing the supply chain currently with the product is the supply chain management best practice. And the supply chain management encompasses all activities associated with the flow and the transformation of goods from the raw materials stage through the end user, as well as the associated information flows. Okay, so that's why information flows are so important. We would like to undertake green supply chain management. Okay, that's why we have to build up IT system, advanced IT system, before we would like to undertake supply chain management. Okay, green supply chain management requires that sustainability criteria be met by maintaining competitiveness through meeting customer needs. Okay, and right now, more and more customers, they care about sustainability. Okay, so that's why right now we have to undertake green supply chain management. Okay, and why should supply chain try to be sustainable? Okay, and the supply chains are boundary spanning. Okay, what is boundary spanning? Okay, it means it's coordination across normal boundaries. Means that many aspects of sustainability can be affected. Okay, and because supply chain is a networking system, okay, so that's why it's boundary spanning. Okay, besides the four fronts, okay, we can coordinate our supply chain members to undertake sustainability. Okay, so that's why it is boundary spanning from initial processing of raw materials to consumption by final customers. Okay, let's refer to this video, greening supply chain. although President Trump doesn't support sustainability right now, and however, multinational companies such as Apple and Microsoft and so on, most of them they support green supply chain management right now. So it is a good news, right? Okay, the green supply chain management programs are moving from compliance to value creation. Okay, this is the traditional cost avoidance. Okay, this is the compliance perspective. Okay, and it is not enough. Right now, this is the new perspective of green supply chain management. We would like to create more values to our target customers. So this is emerging value creation. Okay, if you look at traditional perspective, cost reduction, assure compliance, minimize risk, maintain health, protect the environment. Okay, and this is the new perspective of green supply chain management. Okay, we would like to enhance our values, okay, raise productivity, enhance relationship, okay, support innovation, and enable growth. Okay. Any question? Okay, let's take break. Let's take break right now. And which group would like to present the reading? Which group? Okay, let's take break. Take break right now. Okay, and can say financial holding companies, top one financial holding company in Taiwan. Okay, and it is also our partner, okay, our university partner. Okay, and Kasei Financial Holding Company, they support our BOT project in Taipei campus. Okay, so BOT means build, operate, and transfer. Okay, they invest about 3 billion NT dollars, about 3 billion NT dollars, okay, to build our campus. Okay, they have the right to operate this kind of facility. And in addition, they invest besides 3 billion NT dollars, they also give our university some project. Okay, and this is a cooperation project between Kasei Financial Holding Company and our university. Okay, and this project is related to ESG project. For example, if you take our college, okay, as an example, we build up Taiwanese sustainability evaluation framework. Okay, and based on this framework, Taiwanese sustainability evaluation framework, and we build up several famous sustainability index. Okay, and we provide consulting service, okay, to our alumni or Taiwanese business. Okay, so any question? It is Kasei Financial Holding Company is a best practice, okay, for sustainable finance in Taiwan. Okay, let's continue our topic, green supply chain management. Okay, the companies are starting to view green supply chain management as a strategy analysis tool. Okay, and this is a pollution prevention hierarchy. Okay, this is a pollution prevention hierarchy. Okay, and we would like to reduce pollution. Okay, pollution prevention hierarchy. Okay, it is a valuable environmental programs. Okay, and however, it is not easy to reduce pollution, especially some pollutions are produced from our supply chain members. Okay, so that's why we have to cooperate with our supply chain members to reduce the total pollution of the entire supply chain. Okay, and we have to change our perspective from short-term perspective to long-term perspective. Okay, from technical perspective to strategy perspective. Okay, if you look at in the past, okay, most of the enterprises, they focus on short-term perspective and the technical perspective. Okay, we just deal with disposal of the waste or the pollutions. Okay, this is the end of the pie pollution control. Okay, the second stage is control technology. Both of them, they are end of the pie pollution control. Okay, and the next is reuse and recycle. Okay, we mentioned about 3R tools, right? Reduce, reuse, and recycle, right? The first priority is reduce rather than reuse or recycle. So that's why the highest level, our first priority is source reduction. Okay, and the second priority is reuse and recycle. Okay, so this is the pollution prevention hierarchy. However, as we know, source reduction is our first priority. It is not easy to undertake source reduction. Okay, so that's why we need to cooperate with our supply chain members. Okay, for example, to redesign our products. Okay, to select our raw materials. Okay, or redesign our component parts and so on. If we would like to undertake source reduction, so that's why we need to undertake green supply chain management. Okay, speaking of best practice of green supply chain management, okay, focus on the business result first. Okay, firstly, we align green supply chain goals with business goals. Okay, secondly, we evaluate the supply chain as a single life cycle system and use green supply chain analysis as a catalyst for innovation. Okay, and focus on source reduction to reduce waste. Speaking of aligning green supply chain management improvements with your business goal, create strategic values. Okay, before embarking on green supply chain improvements, okay, you need to determine the role of environmental in your business. Okay, for example, product differentiation. Okay, manage competitors, cost reduction, risk management, redefine market. Okay, so these issues, if you consider these issues, you have to consider the green supply chain management. Sometimes you need to cooperate with your supply chain members. Okay. For example, if you take risk management as an example, okay, we would like to undertake risk management. Okay, with right now climate change is a huge risk for the entire supply chain. Okay, and it is not easy to manage this kind of climate change. risk. Okay, we can cooperate with our supply chain members, okay, to mitigate this kind of climate change risk. Okay, when green supply chain programs are properly aligned to corporate goals, okay, successes become leading indicators of business success. Okay, so for example, environmental indicators are the better scorecard, okay, greater drive for innovation, stakeholder support, okay, and so on. Okay, and why should supply chains try to be sustainable? Because our stakeholders they care about sustainability. Okay, so that's why supply chain must be sustainable right now. Okay, we need to reduce cost and waste and manage risk, especially climate change, okay, and biodiversity right now. Okay, and create distinguished reputation, reinforce shareholders' value. Okay, speaking of drivers of environmental barriers, okay, green supply chain management leverage the role of the environment in supply chain value creation. Okay, so right now it's not easy to undertake value creation from a single enterprise price. Okay, however, if we can cooperate our supply chain members, okay, we can create significant values for our target customers. Okay, and there are two kinds of values we can create. Okay, tangible and intangible. Okay, tangible outcomes include profitability, asset utilization, and service level. Okay, and how about intangible value drivers? If we would like to enhance tangible outcomes, okay, we need to enhance tangible outcomes by means of intangible value drivers, which include customer relationship, reputation, your corporate reputation, okay, continuity, continuous improvement, or continuous innovation. Okay, and alliances. Okay, we need to build up strategic alliances with our supply chain members and technology. Okay, we need to build up IT technology. Okay, and to link our supply chain members. Okay, so that's why supply chain programs are so important. Okay, if you can build up outstanding green supply chain programs, you can meet the needs of your stakeholders. Okay, for example, your employee satisfaction, environmental sustainability, okay, community quality of life. Okay, speaking of practice of green supply chain management, okay, and pre-qualification of the supplier, okay, require or encourage environmental criteria for approved suppliers. So that's why we need to evaluate our supply chain members every year. Okay, and if you would like to determine the criteria you would like to adopt to evaluate your supply chain members, you have to, this criteria must include triple bottom lines of sustainability, okay, which include economic dimension, social dimension, and environmental dimension. it requires and encourages suppliers to undertake independent environmental certification. Okay, for example, ISO 14000, and the environmental requirement at the purchasing phase. Okay, build environmental criteria into supply contract conditions. Okay, and incorporate EHS step sourcing tips. Okay. EHS means environmental, health, and safety. Okay. Environmental, health, and safety department. Okay. And the supply-based environmental performance management. Okay, so sometimes we can send supplier environmental questionnaires to our suppliers. Okay, and sometimes we can assign independent third party to undertake supply environmental audit and assessment. Okay, based on the questionnaire survey, the result of questionnaire survey, okay, and the audit result from the independent third party, okay, we can collect the feedback from our suppliers to improve our supply chain management. Okay, and the next practice of green supply chain management is build environmental considerations into product design. Okay, and jointly develop cleaner technology with suppliers. Okay, and conduct life cycle analysis in cooperation with suppliers. Okay, and engage suppliers in design for environment, product innovation. Okay, and furthermore, we need to cooperate with suppliers to deal with end-of-pipe environmental issues. Okay. For example, pollution control, reduce packaging waste, and the customer or supplier interface, okay, and reuse and recycle materials in cooperation with the suppliers and so on. Okay, the next practice is influence legislation to facilitate better green supply chain policy, and work with industry peers to standardize requirements, okay, and inform suppliers of corporate environmental concerns, okay, and promote exchange of information and ideas. Okay, and the next is implementing green supply chain properly will drive a real business value. Green supply chain concept manage environmental impacts where they occur, ideally before they occur. Okay, best practice focus on the business, not the social values that green supply chain management creates. Okay. For example, align green supply chain goals with business goals. Evaluate the supply chain as a single life cycle system. Use environmental analysis as a catalyst for innovation. Okay, and focus on source reduction to reduce waste. Okay, speaking of evaluating the supply chain as a system, okay, these two life cycle optimizations. Okay, if you look at this is the traditional supply chain, okay, from concept generation, okay, product design, raw material, transport management, and manufacturing, transport, retailer, okay, and disposal. Okay, this is traditional supply chain. Okay, so this supply chain, we deliver products. Okay, this is the output. The output of supply chains include products, waste, and the cash flow, right? Okay, we need to maximize the good outputs, which include products and cash flow, right? Okay, in addition, we need to minimize the bad input and the output. For example, we need to reduce the source of raw materials, reduce energy consumption, okay, and reduce the waste, and reduce the cost of raw materials and the component part. Okay. So the key point is we need to maximize the good outputs, okay, and minimize the bad inputs and the bad outputs. Okay, speaking of eliminating sources of waste in supply chain. Okay. For example, if you take overproduction as an example, okay, don't build product before needed. Okay, so if you take mainland China as an example, right now overproduction is a regular situation for mainland China right now. Okay, so that's why they can provide low price of products to the other area. Okay, so and the delay between activities in chains, okay, eliminate especially waste, eliminate pollutions, okay, and unnecessary transfer or conveyance of products, okay, includes both internal and external movement. Okay, so that's why sometimes we need to redesign our activities, okay, to reduce unnecessary movement. Okay, any question? Let's take a break. Right now. Any question? No? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, and nextly is outstanding in corporate sustainability in regenerative agriculture, DEI, water sustainability, so on.